My son slammed a stack of bills on my kitchen table so hard that my coffee splashed over the rim of the mug. "Mom, I'm not asking anymore," he snapped. "Sell the café. I need the money. Before you watch another second, breathe. Because this story might hit closer to home than you expect. If you've ever been hurt by someone you love, you'll feel every beat of this." That one sentence cut through the quiet of my little house like a cold wind. But I didn't flinch. I simply wiped the drop of coffee running toward my wrist and looked at him the way a mother does when she already knows far more than her child realizes. It was 6:30 in the morning, the same time I always sat by the window with my robe tied tight and my slippers barely hanging onto my feet. The sun hadn't fully climbed the trees yet. It was that soft gray hour where even the birds take their time waking. My kitchen smelled of cinnamon oatmeal I'd left cooling on the stove, though I doubted either of us had much appetite now. My son Mark stood over me like an impatient stranger instead of the boy I once walked to school with his lunchbox bouncing against his knees. He hadn't even taken off his jacket. His hair was a little too messy for that early hour, and there were dark circles beneath his eyes, signs I'd quietly noticed building for months. "I told you I'm not selling," I replied calmly, sliding the bills aside. "And you dropping these on my table won't change that." He let out a sharp breath, pacing behind the chair across from me. He always paced when he was nervous, though he'd never admit it. His shoes squeaked against the linoleum, a tiny sound but loud enough in a room filled with tension. "Mom, you're being stubborn," he said. "The cafe isn't making you rich. You're old. You should be slowing down. I'm offering you a way out." "A way out," I repeated with a small laugh, though nothing about this was funny. "From what?" "My own life." He paused at the counter, hands gripping the edge as if he needed something to steady himself. That tiny gesture made me look a little closer at him. His hands were shaking. Only slightly, but enough for a mother to see. I didn't comment on it. I'd learned long ago that you learn more when you let someone believe you're letting things go unnoticed. "What are these bills?" I asked instead, gently tapping the stack he had brought. "They aren't mine." "It doesn't matter whose they are," he said too quickly. That was clue number one, and a big one. He'd been hiding something for a while. I knew it. Mothers can sense when their grown children get tangled in things they shouldn't. But I had kept quiet until I had enough pieces to understand the outline of the puzzle. Not the full picture. Just enough to know this morning wasn't about helping him. It was about bailing him out of a mess he created. "This isn't the first time you've asked," I reminded him. My voice stayed soft, steady. "Actually, last month you asked in a nicer tone. And the month before that, you hinted it would be a good idea. Now suddenly it's urgent." He turned toward me sharply. "Because it is urgent." "And why is that?" I asked. "You haven't told me." His jaw tightened. He always clenched it when he was about to lie. "Mom, please," he said, lowering his voice. This time I need you to trust me." There was the phrase people use when what they really want is control. I folded my hands on the table, my fingers brushing the ring I rarely took off. The metal felt warm, comforting, and a quiet reminder that I wasn't nearly as helpless as he assumed. "Mark," I said, "if you want my trust, you give me the truth." He looked at the floor. A long silence stretched between us, broken only by the ticking clock above the stove. I studied him carefully. His shoes were scuffed. His jacket was the same one he wore 3 winters ago. It didn't fit the way it once had. His collar was wrinkled as if he hadn't slept in it. Maybe he had. "You're in trouble," I said softly. He froze. Not a muscle moved. Then he barked out a humorless laugh. "I'm not in trouble. I'm fine." "No," I replied, leaning back. "You're not. You're hiding something. And you want me to pay for it." His eyes flashed with something, fear, anger, a mixture. He grabbed the bills again and thrust them toward me. "I need 40,000, he said. "And the cafe will get you that. Sell it. Please." "You think the cafe is worth only 40? I asked quietly. "Is that what you think of the place that fed you half your childhood?" He shut his eyes, and for a moment he looked like a boy again. Lost. Cornered. Searching for a door. But I wasn't opening one for him. Not this time. I reached for my mug and took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle into my chest. That I felt calm. Almost too calm. Because I already knew where this conversation was headed. I had sensed it in the way he stopped calling me mom and started calling me ma'am. In the way he avoided my eyes when neighbors mentioned his old friends. In the way he kept checking his phone during dinner, waiting for messages he would never explain. Something, or someone, had a hold on him. And I had a feeling this had nothing to do with a business plan. Still, I didn't push him further. People reveal the most when they're desperate. And he was inching closer. I'm not selling, I said again. He slammed his fist on the table. Why not? The birds outside scattered from the noise. I didn't raise my voice. I barely blinked. Because the cafe is all I have left that still feels like home. He scoffed. Home? Mom, it's a rundown shop with peeling paint. Well, I said, setting my mug down, then you shouldn't want it so badly. His cheeks reddened. He grabbed his jacket zipper and yanked it halfway up, then let it fall again. Another nervous habit he had since childhood. Fine, he said in a low voice. If you won't help me, then we're done. Don't call me. Don't expect me. I'm not your responsibility anymore. Something sharp twisted inside my chest. Not pain exactly. More like the final click of a lock. A sound you hear once and never forget. He headed toward the front door. His footsteps were heavy, angry, leaving dents in the quiet morning. But when he yanked the door open, he paused. His shoulders rose and fell quickly as if he was debating turning around, saying something else, softening even for a second. He didn't. He walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. Cold air swept into the kitchen, brushing past my ankles. I didn't get up right away. I waited, listening to his footsteps fade down the wooden porch steps. Then, just as I stood to close the door, someone appeared on the other side. A young man. Barely 20. Thin jacket, nervous expression, hands tucked tight into his pockets like he wasn't sure if he belonged anywhere. Ma'am, he said softly. I'm looking for work. I heard you own the cafe. The morning light hit his face just enough for me to see his eyes. Kind but haunted. And something about the way he looked at me made my heart beat slow in a strange way, as if the universe had suddenly shifted its weight. I kept my hand on the doorknob, studying him before letting him in. What's your name? I asked. He told me. Then I asked the next question, one every woman his mother's age might ask. And your mother? What's her name? He hesitated. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper as he answered. And the moment he said that name, the name my son once swore he'd left behind, the name tied to a chapter he hoped I'd forgotten, my knees nearly buckled. The ground didn't just shift. It opened. And as the young man stepped fully onto my porch, I felt a tremor of something I hadn't felt in years. A plan forming. But I didn't show it. I simply held the door wider and said, "Come in, dear. We'll talk." Inside, the cinnamon oatmeal cooled. Outside, the sun finally broke past the trees. And somewhere in the distance, I could still hear my son's footsteps walking away. Not knowing that everything he'd tried to hide had just walked straight into my home. And I wasn't letting it walk back out. The thought still echoed in my mind as I gently closed the door behind the young man. He stood just a few steps inside, looking unsure of whether he should keep his shoes on or take them off. His shoulders were tight, hands tucked deep in the pockets of a jacket that looked a size too big, maybe borrowed or handed down. His eyes darted around my entryway, taking in the family photos, the coat hooks, the umbrella stand, all the small things that made a house feel lived in. I gave him a reassuring nod before motioning toward the kitchen. "Come on in, sweetheart. Let's sit down for a moment." He followed me quietly. The rhythm of his footsteps was soft, careful. He wasn't the kind of young man who barged into a space. He stepped into it like someone familiar with being an outsider. The kitchen still held the tension from moments earlier, though the air had calmed some. My cinnamon oatmeal had gone cold on the stove, and the coffee ring on the table reminded me of the argument that had slammed into my morning like a truck. The stack of bills Mark had thrown down was still there, though now slightly shifted from when I'd moved them out of the young man's line of sight. I pulled out the chair across from mine, the same one my son had leaned over minutes ago. He hesitated before sitting as if unsure he deserved the spot. His manners didn't come from training, they came from struggle. "What's your name again?" I asked gently. He cleared his throat. "Danny." His voice was soft, polite, carrying the kind of respect most young men lost years ago. I poured him a glass of water because his lips looked dry, and he accepted it with a nod. "Danny, I said, folding my hands on the table. You mentioned you're looking for work. How did you hear about my cafe? My friend works part-time at the convenience store near it, he said. He told me you were always busy in the mornings and that you might be hiring. I've been going around town hoping someone would give me a chance. A chance. That word clung to the air between us. You've worked in food before? I asked. He shook his head. No, ma'am. But I'm good with people. I learn fast. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was being honest. The humility in his voice was rare, especially at his age. I nodded slowly. How old are you, Danny? 20, he said. Just a boy, really, not much older than my son had been when he started helping me make sandwiches from scratch in that same cafe kitchen. For a moment, a memory flashed. Mark wiping chocolate frosting on his shirt, laughing as though the whole world was his playground. But the memory settled quickly. The man who left my home earlier wasn't the boy in my mind. I studied Danny quietly, giving myself a moment to breathe. His name, his presence, the timing, everything felt connected in a way that tugged at a place deep inside me, a place mothers sense but don't speak of until they're ready. How's your mother? I asked carefully, keeping my tone light, conversational. He shifted in his seat. She's okay, I guess. Working when she can. She's tired a lot. His pause told me the truth was heavier than the words. Does she know you're out looking for a job today? I asked. No, he said quickly. She'd tell me not to bother people. The sadness in his voice made my chest tighten. You're not bothering me. His eyes lifted to mine and something flickered there. Relief mixed with something older, maybe disappointment from too many slammed doors or unanswered calls. I leaned back, letting the chair creak under me. The early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, throwing soft stripes across the table. The room felt smaller than usual, as if something important had stepped into it with us. You came a long way to get here, didn't you? I asked. He nodded. Walked about 30 minutes. Wasn't too bad. Did you have breakfast? He shook his head, embarrassed. Not yet. I reached for the bowl of oatmeal on the stove. It was lukewarm, but nothing a few seconds in the microwave couldn't fix. I warmed it up, added a little honey, because every son, even someone else's, deserved sweetness in the morning, and placed it in front of him. Eat, I said softly. Then we'll talk about the cafe. Thank you, ma'am, he murmured, his voice catching a little. I sat across from him, watching him take the first spoonful as if it were the first real meal he'd had in days. There is something about hunger, true hunger, that reveals a person's life. Danny didn't eat greedily. He ate carefully, politely, almost apologetically. Your mother raised you well, I commented. His spoon paused midair. She tried, he said. The way he said it, it carried a weight only a woman could hear. Does your father help? I asked quietly, pretending the question was casual. He didn't look up. Never met him. My breath caught. Not all the way but enough. There was a pattern forming, one I wasn't ready to name out loud. Not yet. The kitchen felt colder suddenly, despite the warm bowl in his hands. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. He nodded, forcing a smile. It's okay. Mom says we do fine on our own. His words were brave, but his eyes betrayed how alone he felt. I recognized that kind of innocence, the kind built on hope instead of reality. As he finished his oatmeal, I noticed his hands again. They looked capable yet worn, maybe from helping his mother, maybe from doing odd jobs around town. Something about the way he held the spoon reminded me of someone else. Someone I still loved even though he left my house in anger minutes ago. Do you have a resume? I asked. He shook his head. I've never had a real job to make one. Then we'll make one together, I said. His eyes widened slightly as if kindness was foreign currency and I was offering too much. I don't want to take advantage, he whispered. You're not, I assured him. You're showing up. That matters. He nodded again, and for the first time his shoulders relaxed a little. I glanced at the stack of bills my son had left behind. Danny noticed them too. His gaze lingered for a second before he quickly looked away. That your son? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. He was here earlier. He sounded upset, Danny said, his voice careful. I inhaled slowly. He was. Danny didn't pry further. He didn't need to. Some tensions fill a room whether you name them or not. Did you two fight? He asked after a moment. We disagreed, I said simply. About the café. He gave a small nod. Mom and I fight sometimes too. Mostly about money. There was again, money. Money twisted into the seams of both our mornings, pulling threads neither of us had meant to unravel. Is that why you're looking for work? I asked. Yes, he admitted. She's been sick off and on. I don't want her worrying about the rent or food or anything. His sincerity hit me harder than I expected. There was a steadiness in him, a loyalty I had been missing in my own son for years. It wasn't fair to compare them, but the contrast stood sharp and painful. I can train you, I said gently. The cafe is busy, especially mornings. If you're willing to learn, I'll teach you. He blinked in surprise. Really? You don't even know me. I know enough, I said. He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Thank you, ma'am. You can call me Linda, I offered. He smiled a little. Okay, Miss Linda. The title felt warm, comforting in a way I hadn't felt since before my son started pulling away. For a few seconds the kitchen felt peaceful again. But peace rarely lasts in a house that's holding secrets. A sudden vibration buzzed from Danny's pocket. He froze, then slowly pulled out his phone. The cracked screen lit up with a name I couldn't quite see, but the expression on his face was unmistakable, worry mixed with guilt. You can answer it, I said. He shook his head. It's fine. She'll call again later. Your mother. I guessed. He nodded softly. Tell her you're safe, I urged. He hesitated, then stepped toward the doorway to make the call. His voice was low, gentle, reassuring, nothing like the raised tone my own son had used that morning. While he spoke, I glanced again at the stack of bills Mark had brought. Something gnawed at me, an instinct, a memory, a detail I hadn't fully allowed myself to connect. The names on those papers, the timelines, the withdrawals, the secrecy, and now this boy. It was all too close, too aligned, too familiar. Danny ended the call and walked back slowly. She worries a lot, he said. Good mothers do, I replied. He looked at me, then really looked. You worried about your son? I always worry, I said. Even when they give you every reason not to. He nodded thoughtfully as if he understood something deeper than the words themselves. I took a long breath. Danny, I'm going to ask you one more thing. Okay. When you told me your mother's name earlier, why did you hesitate? His eyes dropped. His hands tightened at his sides. I wasn't sure if you'd recognize it, he said slowly. A chill ran down my spine, not from fear but from clarity. And why would I recognize it? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He swallowed. Because she said she knew someone who owned a cafe years ago. My heart thudded once hard. Someone who owned a cafe. Someone he had kept hidden. Someone tied to the bills on my table. Someone tied to the name Danny had whispered on my porch. I leaned in, my voice calm, steady, deceptively soft. Danny, I said, tell me again, your mother's name. He lifted his eyes to mine. And the name fell between us like a stone. A name my son never wanted me to hear again. A name that cracked open a truth I had spent years unknowingly circling. A truth he had buried so deep he thought no one, not even I, would ever find it. I exhaled slowly. The beginning of the truth was here. But the rest was waiting. And I was ready. The moment that thought settled into me, it felt like a quiet switch had flipped somewhere deep in my chest. Steady, calm, almost frightening in its certainty. Danny sat across from me still, his eyes downcast, the name of his mother hanging in the air like a slow-burning fuse. He didn't fully understand the impact of what he'd said. He just felt guilty for saying it. I exhaled softly and pushed my chair back, letting my palms rest flat against the warm wood of the table. The morning light had shifted by now, sliding across the kitchen floor in long stripes, catching the dust floating in the air between us. The house felt different. Not uncomfortable, just charged. As if the truth had rearranged the walls themselves. Danny watched me cautiously. Did I say something wrong? No, I answered, keeping my voice gentle. You said what you needed to. Sometimes the truth comes out in pieces before we're ready for the whole thing. He nodded slowly, though his confusion hadn't eased. I didn't want to overwhelm him with questions, not yet. He was still just a young man looking for a job, trying to help his mother, unaware that he'd walked into the middle of a story much older than him. One that I had lived with longer than he'd been alive. I stood and opened the kitchen drawer where I kept extra pens, coupons, and a small pad of paper. My hands moved on instinct, not hesitation. When I sat back down, he straightened his posture like he expected a test. "Let's write your resume," I said. His eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Really? Really?" I said with a soft smile. "Everyone starts somewhere." He breathed out a shaky laugh, relieved. I don't know what to put. "That's why I'm here," I assured him. As he began listing what little experience he had, helping neighbors with yard work, carrying groceries for an elderly woman across the street, keeping an eye on his younger cousins, I wrote it all down neatly. Each line told me more about his character than any formal job could. He helped people quietly without expecting anything back. I found myself glancing at him more than the paper, watching the way he thought before he spoke, the way he second-guessed whether something was worth writing. "It's all worth it," I said whenever he hesitated. "Everything shows who you are." He smiled, a genuine one this time. His whole face softened. When we finished, I slid the paper toward him. "There," I said. "Your first resume." "Thank you," he whispered, staring at it like he'd been handed a key he wasn't sure he deserved. It was then, while he admired that simple paper, that the next idea came to me. Not impulsively, not out of anger, but out of a deep, anchored resolve. The kind only a mother scorned can feel after being pushed too far. I looked at the clock. Almost 8. The cafe would start filling up soon. If Danny was going to work, today was as good a day as any. And if I was going to take back control of the story my son tried to rewrite for his own convenience, this was where it began. "Danny," I said, breaking the silence, "do you want to come with me to the cafe? I can show you around." His eyes shot up. "Today?" "Yes," I said. "Right now." He swallowed hard, nerves crawling up his throat. I'd like that." "Good," I said, standing. "Get your jacket." While he reached for his coat, I slipped into the hallway and grabbed my own. My hand brushed against the small file box stored on the top shelf of the coat closet, the same one I'd looked through the night before. The one holding receipts, transfers, and documents with names I had pretended not to see for far too long. For a moment I froze. The box felt heavy, though I didn't move it. I just touched it. It reminded me why this morning felt different. Why I felt different. Why my son's demand to sell the cafe no longer stung as much as it sharpened. It was never about the money. It was about erasing something. Someone. But I didn't open the box. Not yet. That wasn't the story Danny needed to hear, not today. And it wasn't the moment for me to confront the part of my past I had avoided for years. Instead, I let my hand fall away and turned back toward the kitchen. "You ready?" I asked. He nodded, pulling his sleeves over his wrists like a boy preparing for his first day of school. We stepped outside. The air had warmed just enough to make the breeze feel gentle rather than cold. Danny followed me across the small front yard, his footsteps light, almost hesitant. As we walked, I watched him from the corner of my eye, the way he glanced at my house one last time as if trying to memorize a place where someone finally treated him kindly. The cafe was only a short walk from my home, nestled on the corner of Maple Street, its worn blue awning fluttering softly in the breeze. It wasn't fancy, never had been, but it was sturdy and loved. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open, and the familiar smell of fresh bread, brewed coffee, and warm pastries wrapped around us like a hug. Danny paused just inside, looking around with wide eyes. "It's nice," he said softly. "It's humble," I corrected, "but it's mine." His gaze lingered on the framed photos of customers through the years, the chalkboard menu with crooked handwriting, the mismatched mugs stacked behind the counter. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that mattered more to me than anything money could buy. I motioned toward the counter. "Let's start with the basics." For the next hour, I showed him how to grind beans, wipe down the machines, ring up an order, restock pastries, and greet customers properly. He listened closely, nodding and asking questions at just the right moments. He wasn't trying to impress me, he genuinely wanted to learn, and that settled something in my heart I didn't realize needed settling. At one point, a regular named Karen walked in, spotted Danny, and raised an eyebrow. "Who's this handsome young man?" "He's helping me today," I said. "Helping? Or replacing someone?" she teased gently. I smiled. "Let's call it new talent." Karen chuckled and leaned over the counter. Well, he's got a good face. People will trust him. Danny flushed, glancing down. I nudged him lightly. See? You're already making friends. As the morning rush came and went, I watched him grow more comfortable, pouring coffee, carrying trays, wiping counters. He stumbled a few times but recovered quickly, smiling sheepishly at customers who smiled back. Humble, polite, hardworking. Every quality I had prayed my son would keep as he grew older. Around 11, when the cafe quieted, Danny leaned against the counter and let out a tired but proud sigh. I didn't think I'd be good at this. You're very good at this, I said. Better than you think. He glanced at me. You think I could, maybe work here for real? That's the plan, I said, my voice steady. And it was more than he knew. But as I watched him wipe down a small coffee spill, my thoughts turned sharply, not to him but to my son. To the way he had dismissed this place as worthless. To the way he had tried to strip it from me as if it were a burden instead of the one sanctuary I had built with my own hands. To the way he had demanded my cafe, my history, my identity, for reasons he refused to explain. Standing there behind the counter, I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not grief, but determination. A mother's resolve, sharper than anger yet calmer than fear. If my son thought this cafe was his answer, he would soon discover it was actually the beginning of mine. Danny looked at the espresso machine, then at me. Miss Linda? You okay? I blinked, softening my expression. Yes, sweetheart. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was firm. Grounded. Awake. I walked to the back room, opened the drawer where I kept business forms, repair receipts, cleaning supplies, and the paperwork for an official name change request. I had pulled it out weeks ago, unsure why I kept hesitating to fill it out. Maybe part of me had been waiting. Maybe this morning had been the final push. I moved the papers aside but didn't take them yet. Not in front of Danny. This decision wasn't about him, not directly. But he was the spark. He was the reminder. He was the truth walking into my life at the exact moment the lies tried to push their way out. I stepped back into the cafe, watching him sweep the corner near the window where sunlight spilled across the floor. His silhouette looked peaceful, hopeful even. A contrast so painful it was almost poetic. Danny, I called. He turned, sweeping, paused mid-arc. Yes. You did good today, I said simply. His smile reached his eyes. The kind of smile you don't forget. And in that moment, the decision I had danced around for years settled into place. Not out of spite but out of necessity. I wasn't just going to give him a job. I was going to give him a future. A future my son had walked away from. A future built on truth instead of secrets. And if that future wounded my son's pride, well, he had wounded far more than mine. And I had a weapon now. I just hadn't used it yet. But I would. That thought anchored itself in me as I watched Danny sweep the final corner of the cafe floor, sunlight sliding across his shoes. The broom made a slow, steady rhythm, one that steadied me in ways I didn't expect. My decision, quiet and sharp, sat heavy but certain in my chest. I walked toward the front window, adjusting the blinds a little so the morning light washed the tables in a soft glow. Danny looked up at me for direction and I gave him a small nod. He continued sweeping, more confidently now, as if the routine was beginning to settle into his bones. The bell above the cafe door jingled suddenly. I turned automatically, half expecting a customer, but instead, it was the man from the hardware store holding the cardboard box I'd ordered weeks ago. Morning, Linda, he said, placing the box on the counter. Your custom sign came in. My breath caught. Not from surprise, but from timing. Thank you, I said with a polite smile, though inside my heartbeat quickened. I didn't look at the box yet. I didn't need to. I already knew what was inside. It wasn't the final outdoor sign, not the permanent one, but a temporary display version. A sample. A preview of what the name would look like once everything was official. Danny paused sweeping. A sign, he asked. I nodded casually. Just something I've been planning. The hardware store man tipped his cap and left, letting the bell jingle behind him. The cafe felt too quiet afterward, as if the walls themselves were listening for what I'd do next. I stared at the box for a long second, then pulled the tape loose and opened it. Inside lay a rectangular board, glossy and new. The letters shone softly even in the dim light. Sarah's Corner K. Danny leaned in to look, his eyes widening as the name registered. His lips parted slightly like he wasn't sure if he should speak. "That's my mother's name," he whispered. I didn't smile. I didn't explain. I simply said, "I know." His breath trembled. "But why?" "Because it's time," I said gently. "Time for this place to honor someone who deserves it." "But don't you want your name on it?" he asked, confused. "My name is in every brick in every corner already," I said. "I don't need it on a sign." He looked overwhelmed, almost emotional, but kept quiet. I set the board aside, leaning it against the counter. The cafe suddenly felt charged again, not with tension this time, but with purpose. Before either of us could say more, the bell chimed again and one of my oldest customers, Mr. Whitman, shuffled inside. He always came at the same hour, wearing the same jacket, holding the same folded newspaper. He squinted at the sample sign immediately. "Well, I'll be," he said. "You changing the name, Linda?" "I am," I replied calmly. He nodded approvingly. "About time. Place could use a fresh chapter." I felt Danny glance at me. A fresh chapter. Yes. That was exactly what I needed. Mr. Whitman settled at his usual table and I poured him his coffee. 2 creams, no sugar. As I placed the mug down, he looked at Danny and then back at me. "New hire?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," he said. "Young man's got a respectable look about him." I didn't say another word, but the feeling that washed over me was warm, like a quiet confirmation that I was moving in the right direction. The next hour passed with a slow trickle of customers. Each one noticed the sample sign. Some commented on it, others simply nodded. Nobody questioned it, not yet. It felt natural, like the cafe had been waiting for this moment too. Around noon, as the lunch rush began to pick up, 2 local reporters walked in. Nothing fancy, just a pair of young writers from the community paper. They often covered small-town events, school bake sales, fundraisers, business updates. "Linda," one of them called with a bright smile. "We heard you're changing the cafe's name. Mind if we get a quick picture for next week's issue?" I froze only long enough for Danny to look worried. But then I nodded. "Of course." They positioned themselves near the window for better light. "We'd love a photo with you and the young man," one said, gesturing to Danny. Danny's cheeks flushed, but he stepped beside me. His nervousness was almost endearing. The way his hands fidgeted, the way he tried to stand a little taller. "Hold the sign," the reporter instructed. Danny lifted the board and I rested my hand lightly on the top corner. The camera clicked. Then again. And again. I felt calm, too calm. Because I knew this moment, captured so innocently, would soon collide with a truth someone else had worked very hard to hide. When the reporters left, Danny let out a soft exhale. I wasn't expecting that today. I wasn't either, I admitted. But the truth was, I kind of was. Not the exact scenario, but the momentum. The shift. The way everything aligned once the truth began pushing through the cracks. The cafe grew busier as the afternoon rolled toward its peak. People came and went, ordering sandwiches, pastries, slices of pie. Danny kept up, fumbling occasionally, laughing it off, trying again with determination. I found myself watching him often, not just as an employer, but as someone who saw the weight he carried even when he tried to hide it. Around 3 o'clock, as the sunlight angled across the windows in golden beams, I heard the bell above the door ring again. It wasn't soft. It wasn't casual. It wasn't just another customer. It was a slam, an angry, forced jingle that rattled the metal. I turned slowly. Mark stood in the doorway. His jacket half-zipped. His hair disheveled. His eyes wild with something between fear and anger. He wasn't hiding the shaking in his hands this time. He wasn't even trying. He saw the cafe. Then he saw the sample sign leaning on the counter. Then he saw Danny standing beside the pastry case, holding a damp towel. Danny froze. The cloth slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. My son swallowed hard, staring at him with the kind of recognition people try to deny even when it's screaming inside them. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "What is that? What are you doing?" His eyes flicked to the sign again. "Sarah's Corner K." I stepped closer to him. "Calm." Too calm. "I'm making a change," I said simply. "You what?" Mark snapped. "You're renaming the cafe? After her?" He couldn't even say the name. He didn't have to. The truth had already stepped into the room hours before he did. Danny took a small step backward, instinctively retreating, but I held up my hand gently, just enough for him to know he didn't need to move. Not this time. Not now. Mark's voice cracked as he pointed at the sign. You can't do that. I already did, I replied quietly. He looked like someone who had been pushed off a cliff but hadn't hit the ground yet. His breath shook. Why? Why would you do this to me? To you? I repeated, eyebrows lifting. This isn't about you, Mark. His eyes flicked toward Danny, who stood frozen, pale, afraid of being dragged into something he didn't understand. What is he doing here? Mark demanded. Why is he working here? I didn't answer immediately. I watched him instead, the way a mother watches a grown child crumble under the weight of a secret they can no longer hold upright. What's going on? Mark whispered harshly. Tell me. I stepped closer to him until we stood only a foot apart. I think, I said softly, you already know. His face drained of color. Danny swallowed, looking between us, unsure whether to stay or run. No, Mark said, shaking his head rapidly. No. Mom, listen. I have listened, I interrupted. For years. He froze. For years, I repeated, slower this time. I listened to the lies between your excuses. To the fear inside your anger. To the silence that always came when anyone mentioned her name. His eyes glistened. He looked down, then up, then anywhere but at me. A customer in the far corner cleared their throat awkwardly. I ignored it. This moment wasn't theirs. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his desperation. Mom, don't do this. You don't know everything. No, I said. But I know enough. He swallowed hard. Just, please. Not here. I didn't choose the place, I said calmly. You walked in. He flinched. I could feel the truth pressing against him like a wall. I could see it in the way his shoulders tightened, the way his mouth trembled, the way he kept glancing at Danny as if looking at a ghost. Danny stood still, chest rising and falling too fast. He looked young. Too young for the storm he had unknowingly stepped into. Mark inhaled sharply. Mom, can we talk alone? Anything you have to say, I replied, can be said right here. He shook his head, tears threatening. Mom, please. And then his voice broke completely. Please don't do this. I looked at him long and hard. My son. My child. The man who had tried to take everything I built, not out of ambition but out of fear. A fear he no longer controlled. The truth hovered between us like smoke. Almost visible. Almost complete. But not yet. Not fully. Not until the moment was right. And that moment was coming. But not here. Not now. Mark's voice cracked as he said it, standing in the middle of my café like a man who suddenly realized the world was tilting beneath him. His hands trembled at his sides, his eyes flicking between me and Danny as if searching for somewhere to place the blame, somewhere to hide, somewhere to breathe. But there was nowhere left. Not anymore. I took one slow step closer, my heart steady in my chest. Behind the counter, Danny stood frozen, his eyes wide, torn between confusion and fear. A couple of customers shifted in their seats, sensing that something larger than a family argument was taking shape. I did not look away from my son. Mark, I said quietly, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply no longer protecting the things you tried to bury. He swallowed hard. Mom, stop. You don't understand. I understand enough, I replied. I understand more than you ever thought I did. His breathing quickened. He shook his head as though trying to clear it. Please. Not in front of him. I turned my head slightly, just slightly, and looked at Danny, who stood stiffly, his hands gripping the towel he'd dropped earlier. He looked far too young for this moment, far too innocent to be standing in the crossfire of a truth older than he was. I raised my chin. He deserves to hear it, I said softly. Mark's face crumpled. His voice broke again. Mom, don't. Then tell me, I said, my tone calm but sharp as a needle. Tell me what you've been hiding for 20 years. Silence fell over the cafe. Even the hum of the refrigerator in the back seemed too quiet. Danny's eyes darted between us. I don't understand, he whispered. Mark squeezed his eyes shut as if bracing for impact. Not here, he repeated, almost begging. I didn't move. You brought it here the second you walked through that door. A shaky exhale escaped him. His shoulders dropped. He knew it. He knew running was over. He opened his eyes and stared at Danny. Really stared. And the terror on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was recognition. Danny shifted uncomfortably. Why are you looking at me like that? Mark opened his mouth but nothing came out. So I said it for him. Because he sees himself, I said quietly. And he knows why. Danny's breath hitched. Miss Linda. I nodded gently, reassuring him as much as I could. But truth is truth. And this one wasn't thin or fragile or newly formed. It was old. Heavy. Carried behind my son's ribs for 2 decades. Mark, I said, tell him. My son stared at the floor as if hoping it would swallow him whole. When he finally lifted his head, his voice was barely a whisper. Then I think I'm... No, I cut in sharply. No more think. Not after what you've done. Say it plainly. Danny stiffened. Mark's voice cracked. I'm your father. The words hung in the air like smoke. Thick, choking, impossible to ignore. Danny stumbled back a step as if the floor had tilted under him. Why what? He whispered. Mark closed his eyes, a tear sliding down his cheek. Your mother and I, we were together before I met my wife. I was young and stupid. And when she got pregnant, You left, I finished for him. You walked away. You let her raise him alone. Danny's face paled, confusion and heartbreak melting into something deeper. Disbelief, betrayal, a lifetime of unanswered questions suddenly closing in too fast. She said you didn't want to meet me, he whispered, voice shaking. She said you weren't ready. Mark shook his head miserably. I wasn't. And I got married. I made promises. And I thought the past would stay buried. I stepped between them, steady and unmoving. Your past, Mark, I said, is standing right here. Working in the café you tried to take from me. He flinched. Danny backed up until he hit the pastry case. So all this time, all these years, you knew about me? No, Mark said quickly. I didn't know for sure. You knew enough, I snapped. You sent money. You kept secrets. You hid transfers. You hid the truth from me, from your wife, from everyone. You didn't just hide a child, Mark. You hid your responsibility. He lost whatever strength he'd been clinging to. His knees buckled slightly and he caught himself on a chair. Mom, he said weakly. Please. I was afraid. I thought, if people found out, my life would fall apart. I stared at him with sadness more than anger. And what about his life? Mark covered his face with both hands. Danny inhaled shakily, trying to steady himself. Why didn't you ever come? Not once. Mark's hands dropped. His eyes were red. Because I was a coward. Danny pressed his lips together, fighting tears. My mom cried every birthday, he whispered. Every single one. She never said your name, but I knew she was thinking about you. Mark crumpled. I looked at Danny, my voice softer now. You didn't deserve that. Neither of you. Silence formed again, long, heavy, final. Then I turned to my son. Mark, I said, you came to my home, demanded I sell my café, pressured me, lied to me. All so you could pay off the life you tried to hide. He didn't deny it. You didn't want money for a business, I continued. You needed money to keep this secret buried a little longer. Mark whispered, yes. And now, I said, my voice firm, it's done. He looked up in panic. Mom. I'm not helping you hide anymore. He swallowed. You're replacing me with him? I shook my head. No. I'm replacing the lie with the truth. Danny stared at me, eyes wet. Why are you doing this for me? I walked to him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Because you've carried the burden of someone else's shame your entire life, I said. And it's time it ended. Mark's voice cracked again. Mom, please. Don't shut me out. I looked at him, my son, now a man brought to his knees by his own choices. You shut yourself out, I said quietly. I'm just closing the door you walked away from. His face crumpled, a sound slipping from him that I hadn't heard since he was a little boy. A broken, fragile sob. Danny stepped back, unsure. I didn't touch Mark. I didn't comfort him. This was not a moment for saving. This was a moment for ending. Leave, I said softly. Not harsh. Not shouted. Just final. Go. Mark blinked up at me. Mom. I shook my head once. Go. He stood slowly, shaking, wiping his face as if trying to regain dignity that had already slipped through his fingers. He walked to the door. Stopped. Looked at me one last time. Can I ever make this right? He whispered. I took a long breath. That's not a question for me, I said. That's a question for the son you denied. Danny didn't speak. He didn't need to. Mark lowered his head and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The cafe fell silent. I exhaled long and slow, feeling 20 years lift from my shoulders. Danny looked at me, unsure, scared, hopeful all at once. What happens now? He asked quietly. I picked up the sample sign from the counter. Sarah's Corner K. I held it in both hands, felt its weight, its meaning, its justice. I smiled at him. Now, I said, we start fresh. Together. Danny's eyes softened. And as I walked to the front window to hang the sign for the whole town to see, sunlight spilled over us both. A new chapter didn't just begin. A door finally closed. And I had closed it myself. For good. If this story touched you, comforted you, or reminded you of your own strength, subscribe. I share stories for women who've lived, loved, lost, and risen stronger.